In many religious stories, we hear of figures known as the Chosen One. These individuals are set apart by a higher calling, given a task or mission that is crucial to the world, their community, or their faith. But what does it truly mean to be chosen? Who are these individuals, and what do they have to endure in their journey? The term Chosen One often brings to mind grand, heroic figures like Moses, Jesus Christ, or Abraham, people who were tasked with monumental responsibilities. They are seen as exceptional individuals, standing out above the rest because they are chosen for a divine purpose. However, the journey of these figures is not as simple or glamorous as it may seem. While they are admired and revered for their roles, there is something crucial that most of us do not often see: the immense burden they carry. These individuals, whether they are religious figures or heroes in sacred texts, don't just bear the responsibility of fulfilling their divine missions, they carry the weight of their people's hopes, their own internal doubts, and the ever-present fear of failure. In these stories, we see them triumph, but we rarely see the deep pain that accompanies their calling. The public often sees their victories, their miracles, their leadership, but what lies hidden beneath the surface is the constant internal struggle and sacrifice. Being the chosen one means facing an isolated journey, one that often requires immense personal sacrifice and deep emotional pain. The chosen ones are set apart, not just because of their extraordinary mission, but because their path often leads to a loneliness that is unimaginable to those who are not chosen. Their calling means that they must step away from the ordinary lives others live, sometimes even from their loved ones, and devote themselves completely to a cause that only they can fulfill. This path can be overwhelming, as they carry the weight of knowing that the success or failure of their mission has consequences not only for themselves, but for the people they are meant to serve. And through all of this, they are often alone in their pain, with no one who fully understands the depth of their sacrifice. So the question must be asked: does anyone truly understand the hidden pain that these chosen individuals endure on their journey? The burden they bear is not just physical or external, but also deeply emotional and spiritual. The isolation, the fear of failing, the internal struggle to stay true to their calling while enduring immense personal loss. These are aspects of their journey that are often unseen by the world around them. They are praised, even revered, but their struggles, their moments of doubt, their pain often go unnoticed. This is a story that deserves to be told, for while we celebrate the greatness of the chosen ones, it is equally important to acknowledge the hidden struggles they face. It is essential to explore the emotional toll of being chosen, the sacrifices made, and the painful decisions they must endure in their efforts to fulfill their destiny. We often look at these individuals through the lens of admiration, but we must also look at them through the lens of empathy, understanding that their path is not without its dark moments. So, if this concept intrigues you, if you've ever wondered about the deeper, hidden sides of the stories of the chosen ones, make sure to stay with us. Like this video if you find this topic interesting, share it with others who may relate to this journey, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you can explore more insightful content with us. Let's take this journey together and explore the complexities of being chosen, beyond the fame, beyond the miracles, and into the hidden pain that so often goes unnoticed. The life of the chosen one is never one of ease or luxury. The responsibility that comes with this title is one that weighs heavily on their shoulders and often becomes the defining characteristic of their entire existence. In many religious stories, the chosen one is called upon to undertake monumental tasks that no one else can bear. These individuals are not just ordinary people, they are set apart by a higher power, often to lead a community, protect the vulnerable, or deliver a message that will change the course of history. But this responsibility is not something they can take lightly. It is a burden, often too great for any one person to carry, yet it is one that they must bear with strength, faith, and an unwavering commitment to their mission. When you are chosen for such a monumental purpose, the weight of that calling can become overwhelming. The magnitude of responsibility can take its toll on one's spirit and soul. It's not just about completing a task, it's about fulfilling a divine plan that affects not only the chosen individual, but also countless others who rely on them. The chosen one is tasked with leading a people, guiding them through challenges, and often making sacrifices for the greater good. These tasks are often so complex and so critical that no one else can take on the role. There is no room for failure because the consequences are far-reaching and impactful on a global or community level. This responsibility can feel like a heavy chain that ties the chosen individual to their fate, leaving them with little room to act for themselves or choose their own path. The burden of responsibility is not just about taking charge. It's about carrying the hopes, dreams, and futures of others on one's shoulders. The chosen one is not just a leader in the conventional sense. They are a symbol of hope, faith, and divine purpose. When things go wrong, when plans fail, when people suffer, the chosen one feels personally responsible. The emotional and spiritual toll of knowing that their decisions, or their ability to follow through, could have profound implications on the lives of others can be overwhelming. This sense of responsibility can create a feeling of isolation, as no one else can truly understand the weight that the chosen one carries. Even though they are surrounded by people, they often face their challenges alone, unable to fully share their struggles or doubts. One of the most pervasive aspects of this burden is the fear of failure. Failure, for the chosen one, is not merely an inconvenience or a setback. It is often seen as a devastating defeat that could undo everything they have worked for. The fear of failing their mission and the people who rely on them is a constant companion. This fear is not just a passing thought, but a deep, ever-present anxiety that affects every decision they make. For the chosen one, there is no room for error. They cannot afford to falter. If they fail, the consequences could be catastrophic, leading to the suffering of those they are meant to protect or guide. This is a heavy psychological burden that can cause immense emotional distress. The pressure to succeed can also lead to feelings of self-doubt. Even those who are chosen for great purposes are still human. They still experience insecurity, uncertainty, and fear. They may question their own worthiness or capability, wondering if they are truly the right person for the task at hand. The greater the responsibility, the greater the self-doubt, as the chosen one wonders whether they can live up to the expectations placed upon them. The internal conflict between the desire to succeed and the fear of failing can cause significant emotional turmoil. The chosen one must constantly battle with these conflicting emotions, striving to find balance while keeping their mission in focus. An excellent example of this immense burden of responsibility can be found in the story of Moses. Moses was chosen by God to lead the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt, an undertaking that would define his life and impact the history of the Jewish people. The responsibility placed upon Moses was incredibly weighty, not only because of the monumental task of freeing a people from centuries of enslavement, but also because of the personal toll it would take on him. Moses was not simply tasked with leading the Israelites through physical hardship, he was also tasked with their spiritual redemption. He had to serve as a mediator between God and his people, delivering God's laws and commandments, and ensuring that the people followed them. This was a responsibility that could not be delegated or shared. Moses could not pass the task off to anyone else. It was his alone. The weight of this responsibility became especially apparent when Moses was called upon to confront Pharaoh, the most powerful ruler of the time, and demand the release of the Israelites. Moses knew that failure to succeed would result in devastating consequences for his people, and yet he had to act with faith even when he was filled with doubt. In the face of Pharaoh's stubbornness, Moses had to endure hardship after hardship, not just physically, but emotionally as well. He had to witness the suffering of his people and endure the ridicule and rejection of the very people he was trying to save. Moses had moments of deep frustration and doubt. He questioned whether he was the right person for the task. He even pleaded with God to send someone else to fulfill the mission, showing the deep fear of failure that plagued him. The fear of not being able to fulfill his responsibility, of failing his people, haunted him throughout his journey. Even when Moses succeeded in freeing the Israelites, his responsibility did not end. He had to lead them through the wilderness for 40 years, guiding them to the promised land, a journey that was fraught with challenges, rebellion, and loss. Despite his success in liberating his people, Moses faced an internal struggle throughout his entire mission. The burden of responsibility never left him. He bore the pain of seeing his people's lack of faith, of knowing that their journey would be long and difficult, and of carrying the emotional weight of their discontent. His calling was not just about leading a physical exodus, but also about transforming the hearts and minds of his people. This spiritual responsibility weighed heavily on him, adding to the already immense emotional burden. Moses' story is a powerful example of the burden of responsibility that comes with being chosen for a divine purpose. It shows that the path of the chosen one is not easy, nor is it without its moments of doubt and fear. The chosen one carries the weight of their mission, knowing that failure is not just a personal defeat, but a failure that could have consequences for many. The emotional, spiritual, and physical toll of this responsibility is immense. It is a burden that only those who are chosen for such a purpose can fully understand, and even then, it is a burden they must carry alone. The burden of responsibility that comes with being the chosen one is one that cannot be easily understood or dismissed. It is not just about fulfilling a task, it is about bearing the weight of an entire people, the fear of failure, and the emotional cost of leading and sacrificing for others. For the chosen one, there is no easy way out. They must face this burden head-on, even when the path is uncertain and filled with obstacles. It is a responsibility that defines them, shapes them, and ultimately is a part of their identity. As we explored in the previous section, being the chosen one is not just about the grand mission or the responsibility that comes with it. It's also about the internal toll it takes on the individual. The burden of responsibility, while immense, is often accompanied by a profound sense of isolation and loneliness. Even though these individuals may have communities or followers, the journey they must walk is often one that can only be understood by them. In the midst of all the adoration and the support from those around them, the chosen one often faces a deep sense of loneliness. This isolation is not just physical, but emotional and spiritual. It is a loneliness that goes beyond the absence of people. It is the sense that no one can truly understand the weight of what they are carrying. When a person is chosen for a divine mission, they are set apart from the rest. This separation isn't just a matter of position or status, it's the very nature of the task they are assigned that creates a divide. While others may admire them or follow them, they are unable to fully connect with them on the same level. The chosen one is tasked with fulfilling a purpose that transcends the ordinary human experience, and because of this, they often find themselves alone in their thoughts, their struggles, and their pain. They can't share their burden with those around them, because even the closest person will never fully understand the responsibility they carry. This loneliness isn't simply a result of being set apart physically. It is also born out of the emotional and spiritual distance between the chosen one and others. They are often isolated by their mission, by the fact that what they must do requires sacrifice and unwavering commitment. Their calling demands that they set aside personal desires, relationships, and even their own well-being in service of a greater cause. The very nature of this calling isolates them because they are unable to be fully present in the lives of others in the way most people can. They must always be aware of their mission, their responsibilities, and the fact that their life has a greater purpose that can never truly be shared. As we transition from discussing the heavy burden of responsibility that the chosen one bears, we now turn to the emotional aspect of this calling, how it leads to isolation and loneliness. The very nature of the chosen one's mission often requires them to walk alone. The sense of being set apart is not just a feeling, but a reality that shapes their existence. This is especially evident when we look at Jesus Christ, the one who carried the mission of redeeming humanity. Despite the support of his disciples and the followers who believed in him, Jesus faced moments of profound isolation that highlight the deep loneliness that comes with being chosen. Jesus' mission, to redeem humanity and bring salvation, was monumental. The responsibility he carried was unlike any other. He was the one who was chosen to suffer for the sins of the world, to bear the weight of human sin and offer forgiveness. His mission was not just physical, but deeply spiritual, and it required a level of commitment and sacrifice that few could comprehend. But in the midst of this mission, Jesus experienced moments where no one could truly understand what he was going through. One of the most powerful examples of this isolation and loneliness is seen in the Garden of Gethsemane, just before his crucifixion. In the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus prayed fervently, knowing that the time had come for him to face the suffering and death that awaited him. It was here that the emotional and spiritual weight of his mission became too much to bear alone. Despite the fact that he had his disciples with him, Jesus knew that none of them could truly grasp the depth of his anguish. He asked his closest disciples, Peter, James, and John, to stay awake and pray with him. But they could not stay awake, and Jesus was left to face his agony alone. In this moment, Jesus cried out to God, expressing his fear and sorrow, knowing that the road ahead would lead to unimaginable pain. He felt utterly isolated as he faced the impending sacrifice. The fear of what was to come, the weight of his mission, and the knowledge that he would soon be abandoned by even his closest followers filled him with a deep sense of loneliness. In the garden, Jesus was faced with the loneliness that comes with carrying a mission that no one else can fully understand. His disciples, although loyal and supportive, were unable to comprehend the significance of what was about to happen. Jesus knew that he was about to experience physical and emotional pain, unlike anything any person could endure, and in that moment, he felt the full weight of his isolation. Despite the presence of others, he was utterly alone in his suffering. The emotional disconnect between Jesus and those around him was palpable. His pain was something they could not share, nor could they fully understand the depths of what he was about to endure. This scene is one of the most poignant examples of the loneliness that comes with being chosen for a divine mission. Jesus, the Son of God, was not immune to the feelings of isolation and abandonment that so often accompany the path of the chosen one. His mission was so unique, so transformative, that even those closest to him could not truly understand the weight of what he was about to face. This isolation was not just physical, it was emotional and spiritual as well. Jesus was alone in his agony, and this loneliness would only intensify as he faced betrayal by Judas, abandonment by his disciples, and his eventual crucifixion. The loneliness that Jesus experienced is a profound example of the emotional toll that being the chosen one takes on an individual. It shows that the path of the chosen one is one of not only physical suffering, but also emotional isolation. Even in moments of companionship and support, the chosen one is often unable to find true solace because their mission requires them to be set apart. They cannot share their pain, their doubts, or their fears with others because no one can fully understand what they are going through. This isolation is a fundamental part of the experience of being chosen for a divine purpose. The chosen one may have followers, friends, and loved ones, but the weight of their responsibility, the unique nature of their mission, and the sacrifices they must make often leave them feeling alone in their journey. It is a loneliness that is hard to explain to those who are not chosen, and one that can only truly be understood by those who walk that path. The story of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane is not just a story of physical suffering, it is also a story of profound emotional isolation. It reveals the pain of being chosen to bear the weight of the world, knowing that no one else can truly share in that burden. The chosen one's journey is one of sacrifice, and often that sacrifice includes the loss of connection with others. In the end, the chosen one must learn to navigate this isolation, trusting in their mission and the strength it gives them to carry on, even when they feel utterly alone. As we reflect on the loneliness that comes with being chosen, we begin to understand that the path of the chosen one is not just about fulfilling a divine purpose. It is also about facing the isolation that comes with carrying that purpose. This loneliness is not a punishment, but a necessary part of the journey, one that shapes the chosen one's character and strengthens their resolve. It is a loneliness that is often misunderstood by those around them, but it is a loneliness that only those who are chosen can truly understand. As we move from the isolation and loneliness that the chosen one often faces, we now confront one of the most insidious and constant companions on their journey, the fear of failure. The weight of responsibility that accompanies being chosen for a divine mission is not merely a burden to be carried. It is often compounded by the paralyzing fear that failure is not just a personal setback, but a disaster with catastrophic consequences. This fear is not simply a fear of disappointing others or of falling short of expectations. It is the terror that failing in their task will bring ruin not just to themselves, but to the very community or world that depends on them. The chosen one is burdened not only with the responsibility of succeeding in their mission, but with the knowledge that their success or failure will have far-reaching, profound implications. The fear of failure is magnified because their task is never trivial. It is always something that affects the fate of many. Failure is not just a loss for them, it is a loss for the very people they are meant to protect or guide. In the case of the chosen one, failure is not an option. The very nature of their calling demands that they succeed, for to fail means that they have let down not only those who have placed their trust in them, but also the divine power that chose them in the first place. This creates a sense of constant anxiety, an ongoing fear that looms over their every decision, every action. Unlike ordinary leaders or individuals with more manageable responsibilities, the chosen one is aware that every mistake they make could lead to catastrophic results. This weight becomes even heavier when the consequences of failure are not just personal or local, but global or spiritual in scope. There is no room for error when the stakes are so high. The fear of failure can take many forms. For some, it manifests as self-doubt, wondering if they are truly capable of carrying out the task they have been chosen for. For others, it may take the form of fear of judgment, the fear of not living up to the expectations of their followers or the divine being that called them. But perhaps the most crushing aspect of this fear is the knowledge that failure could lead to immense suffering for others. The chosen one is aware that their success or failure could have profound consequences, not just for their own life, but for the lives of the people they are meant to save, lead, or protect. This fear is something that is not always outwardly visible. Often, those who are chosen to carry out great tasks do so with strength and confidence, projecting an image of unwavering faith and determination. But beneath the surface, the anxiety and self-doubt they experience is profound. They carry the fear of failure in their hearts, even as they strive to fulfill their mission. It is this constant pressure, this constant fear of failure, that makes the journey of the chosen one so deeply taxing, both mentally and emotionally. One of the most striking examples of this fear of failure can be found in the story of Prophet Jonah, a key figure in the Hebrew Bible. Jonah was chosen by God to deliver a message of repentance to the city of Nineveh, which was on the brink of destruction due to its wickedness. Jonah's task was clear. He was to go to Nineveh, warn the people of the impending judgment, and call them to repentance so that they might be saved. However, despite being chosen for this important task, Jonah was overwhelmed with a deep fear of failure. He feared that the people of Nineveh would reject his message, mock him, or fail to repent. The consequences of such failure were dire. If the people did not repent, the city would be destroyed. Jonah understood that the destruction of Nineveh would not only be a tragedy for its people, but a disaster for him as well, as he would have failed in carrying out the divine mission given to him. Jonah's fear of failure was so great that he tried to flee from his responsibility. Instead of going to Nineveh, he attempted to escape by boarding a ship bound for Tarshish, running from the task God had set before him. Jonah's attempt to flee from his mission is a poignant example of the fear of failure that plagues the chosen one. Faced with the daunting task of confronting an entire city with the message of God's judgment, Jonah feared that he would not be able to persuade the people of Nineveh to repent. He feared that, even if he succeeded, he would be ridiculed or rejected. The weight of this potential failure was so overwhelming that he chose to run from it rather than face it head-on. However, Jonah's flight was not successful. God intervened, sending a great storm to halt the ship, and Jonah was ultimately thrown overboard and swallowed by a great fish. In the belly of the fish, Jonah had time to reflect on his fear and his refusal to carry out the task assigned to him. It was there that he realized the depth of his fear of failure and the weight of the responsibility he had been given. Jonah's experience inside the fish was a moment of reckoning, a moment where he came face to face with his fear and recognized that, despite the risk of failure, he had to fulfill the mission God had chosen him for. Jonah prayed for forgiveness and vowed to carry out his task. After 3 days in the fish, Jonah was released, and he went to Nineveh, warning the people of their impending destruction. To Jonah's surprise, the people of Nineveh repented. They listened to his message and turned from their wickedness, and as a result, the city was spared from destruction. Jonah's fear of failure had nearly led him to forsake his mission, but in the end he succeeded, and the consequences were life-saving for the people of Nineveh. Yet, even after his success, Jonah still struggled with the weight of his mission. He had feared that failure would lead to destruction, but when his mission succeeded, he was left to wrestle with the complex emotions that came with fulfilling his divine calling. Jonah's story illustrates the profound impact that the fear of failure can have on the chosen one. It is not simply a fear of personal failure, but the fear that failure will have far-reaching consequences, that lives will be lost, and that the mission will fail. The emotional toll of this fear is immense. Even when the mission is ultimately successful, the fear of failure can linger, creating a constant sense of anxiety and dread. The chosen one is never free from the pressure of knowing that their task is critical and that failure is not just an inconvenience, but a catastrophe. The story of Jonah also reveals another aspect of the fear of failure, the reluctance to accept the mission in the first place. Jonah did not simply fear that he would fail. He feared that the mission itself was too great, too daunting, and that he was not the right person for the task. This self-doubt is common among the chosen ones. They are often reluctant to accept the calling that has been placed upon them, not because they don't want to help, but because they are terrified of failing. The burden of responsibility, coupled with the fear of failure, creates a psychological conflict that can be paralyzing. The chosen one must confront not only the task at hand, but their own doubts and insecurities about their ability to carry out the mission. In the case of Jonah, the fear of failure led him to try to escape his calling, but ultimately, he was forced to confront the mission head-on. For the chosen one, this fear is something they must constantly battle, knowing that their actions will have profound consequences. Whether they succeed or fail, the emotional cost is high. The fear of failure is an ever-present part of the journey, and it shapes the way the chosen one views themselves and their mission. It is a constant reminder of the gravity of their task and the immense responsibility they carry. As we consider the fear of failure, we begin to understand that the path of the chosen one is not just about fulfilling a task. It is about confronting the fear of failure head-on, knowing that the consequences of that failure can be catastrophic. The journey is fraught with self-doubt, anxiety, and fear, but it is also one of growth, self-discovery, and ultimately, fulfillment. The chosen one must navigate this fear, trusting in their ability to rise above it and complete the mission they have been given, no matter the personal cost. After exploring the heavy burden of responsibility and the constant fear of failure that the chosen one endures, we now delve into one of the most painful and often heart-wrenching aspects of their journey: sacrifice and loss. Being chosen for a divine purpose is never without cost. The chosen one's path requires them to sacrifice many aspects of their life, things that others might take for granted or see as fundamental parts of a fulfilling existence. These sacrifices are not merely personal inconveniences, but profound losses that shape the entire trajectory of their lives. For the chosen one, their mission requires them to place the needs of others, the needs of the world, above their own desires and comfort. Love, family, friendship, and even their own well-being often must be sacrificed in service of the greater good. The choice to serve a higher purpose comes at a tremendous emotional and personal cost, one that cannot be easily measured or understood by those who are not called to the same mission. The chosen one is required to give up parts of themselves, pieces of their life and identity that others may hold dear. These sacrifices can cause immense emotional pain, and the loss can linger, leaving deep scars long after the mission has been completed. The act of sacrificing one's personal desires and relationships is often a key element of the chosen one's journey. Their purpose is so significant, so vital, that it requires them to constantly prioritize the mission above all else. This often means distancing themselves from family, loved ones, and their own sense of normalcy. The chosen one cannot indulge in the same comforts that others might seek, because their focus must remain on the task at hand. It's not that they don't value love, family, or their own well-being, but their calling demands a level of commitment and focus that leaves little room for personal attachments. This sacrifice of personal connections is often one of the most challenging aspects of being the chosen one. Relationships that might provide solace, comfort, and joy are frequently put on hold, or even severed entirely, as the individual must dedicate themselves fully to their mission. The emotional toll of these sacrifices is profound, as the chosen one must live with the knowledge that the people they love, the relationships they cherish, and their own happiness may never fully be theirs. It is a continual act of choosing the greater good over personal fulfillment. The consequences of these sacrifices are not always immediate, but they compound over time, leaving the chosen one to grapple with feelings of loss, loneliness, and unfulfilled desires. One of the most powerful and poignant examples of sacrifice and loss can be found in the story of Abraham, one of the most revered patriarchs in religious history. Abraham's story is not just one of faith, it is also one of the ultimate sacrifice, a test of unwavering obedience to God. Abraham's faith was tested in a way that few can comprehend. God asked him to make the ultimate sacrifice, to give up what was most precious to him, his son, Isaac. Isaac was not just Abraham's son, but the child through whom God's promise to Abraham would be fulfilled. Isaac was the future of Abraham's legacy, the fulfillment of God's covenant with him. To sacrifice Isaac was to sacrifice the very hope and future that Abraham had believed in for so many years. God's command to sacrifice Isaac came as a shock to Abraham. It was not simply a request, it was a test of faith. God asked Abraham to take the one thing he loved most, the one thing that represented the fulfillment of God's promises, and offer it back to him. This was not an easy command. It was a test that went to the very heart of Abraham's faith and relationship with God. How could Abraham, a father who loved his son deeply, reconcile the idea of sacrificing him? The emotional turmoil Abraham must have felt is beyond comprehension. The act of preparing to sacrifice his son was not just about following God's command, it was about giving up his own future, his own desires, and everything that he had worked for and believed in. Abraham's willingness to sacrifice Isaac illustrates the extent of the loss that the chosen one must endure. To follow God's command, Abraham had to set aside his own emotions, his love for his son, and the hope he had placed in God's promise. It was a sacrifice of unimaginable magnitude, one that required Abraham to trust in God's plan, even when it seemed incomprehensible. In his heart, Abraham must have felt the weight of the loss, knowing that the future he had envisioned for Isaac, the future he had envisioned for his family, might never come to pass. Yet Abraham's faith was unwavering. He trusted that God's plan was greater than his own understanding, and he was willing to sacrifice what mattered most to him in order to fulfill that plan. At the moment of truth, when Abraham was prepared to sacrifice Isaac, God intervened, sparing Isaac's life. Abraham's faith and willingness to sacrifice were proven, and as a result, God reaffirmed his promise to Abraham. Isaac was not taken from him, and Abraham's faith was rewarded. However, even though Isaac's life was spared, the sacrifice Abraham had made in his heart was profound. Abraham had been willing to give up everything, his future, his hope, and his most cherished relationship, because he believed that God's will was more important than his own desires. Abraham's story is a powerful example of what it means to be the chosen one and to make the ultimate sacrifice. The sacrifice Abraham was asked to make was not just about physical loss, it was about emotional and spiritual surrender. Abraham was willing to let go of his most precious attachment, trusting that God's plan was greater than his own. In doing so, he demonstrated the very essence of what it means to follow a higher calling, to trust in a purpose greater than oneself, even when it demands the most painful sacrifices. The sacrifice of Isaac is not just a story of obedience, but a profound reflection on the cost of being chosen for a divine mission. The chosen one must often make sacrifices that others cannot comprehend. Their mission requires them to let go of what they love, to step away from personal desires and relationships, and to dedicate themselves fully to the task at hand. This is a loss that is both personal and spiritual, and it is one that leaves a lasting emotional mark on the chosen one. Even when the mission is successful, the sacrifices made along the way cannot be undone. The chosen one is forever changed by the sacrifices they make, and they carry the weight of those sacrifices for the rest of their lives. Abraham's story teaches us that sacrifice is an integral part of the journey of the chosen one. It is not just about giving up material possessions or personal comforts, it is about the emotional and spiritual cost of following a calling that demands everything. The chosen one is asked to give up what they love most, and in doing so, they demonstrate a faith and obedience that transcends human understanding. This sacrifice is not just a loss, it is an act of unwavering devotion to a higher purpose, a purpose that requires the chosen one to surrender their own desires for the greater good. The emotional toll of such sacrifices is profound, and the loss is never fully healed, but the chosen one moves forward, knowing that their mission is worth the cost. As we move from examining the profound sacrifices and losses that the chosen one endures, we arrive at another complex and deeply personal aspect of their journey: the struggle for self-identity. When an individual is chosen for a higher purpose, their life is often turned upside down. The personal desires, ambitions, and dreams they once held may no longer align with the responsibility and divine mission that has been thrust upon them. The very nature of being the chosen one requires that they set aside many aspects of their identity to focus entirely on fulfilling their purpose. But this raises an important question. When you are chosen for a higher calling, can you still be yourself? Can you still maintain a sense of personal identity and autonomy when everything around you requires that you become something greater, something other than who you were before? The struggle for self-identity is perhaps one of the most subtle yet powerful challenges faced by the chosen one. While they may understand the importance of their mission and the need to serve a greater purpose, this does not eliminate the human desire to retain a sense of self. The task at hand often requires them to sacrifice their personal desires, their sense of individual freedom, and even their own aspirations. They are no longer just individuals with personal lives. They are now figures defined by their calling and their mission. This shift can create a deep internal conflict between the person they once were and the person they are now expected to be. The chosen one must reconcile the life they envisioned for themselves with the reality of the path they have been called to walk. The calling is often so overwhelming, so consuming, that it forces them to set aside personal dreams and desires in favor of fulfilling the mission. Yet, despite this overwhelming sense of duty, the chosen one is still human, and within them is the yearning to be understood, to be seen as more than just a vessel for a divine purpose. There is a profound inner struggle that arises as they try to balance the mission with their own need for identity, for the sense of being more than just an instrument of a higher power. This tension is not simply an external challenge, it is deeply psychological, rooted in questions of self-worth and self-definition. The chosen one may feel that they are losing their sense of who they truly are in the process of fulfilling their divine mission. The question of whether they are still allowed to be themselves, to have their own dreams and desires, becomes increasingly difficult to answer as they are pulled further into their responsibility. As they navigate their journey, they must grapple with these questions, trying to reconcile the person they are with the person they must become. One of the most poignant examples of this struggle for self-identity can be found in the story of Moses, one of the most prominent figures in religious history. When Moses was called by God to lead the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt, he was faced with an overwhelming responsibility. He was asked to be a leader, a prophet, and a deliverer for an entire nation. But Moses was not immediately comfortable with this role. In fact, he struggled deeply with feelings of inadequacy and self-doubt. Moses was hesitant to accept his divine calling, questioning whether he was the right person for the task. He saw himself as unworthy of the monumental responsibility that had been placed upon him, and he wrestled with the question of whether he was truly capable of leading the Israelites to freedom. Moses' self-doubt was rooted in his sense of self-identity. He had spent much of his life in exile, far removed from the people he was now called to lead. He had been raised as an Egyptian prince, but he was also a Hebrew, and the connection to his own people was tenuous at best. When God appeared to him in the burning bush and told him to return to Egypt to free the Israelites, Moses was not filled with immediate confidence. Instead, he felt a profound sense of disconnect between his identity and the task at hand. He questioned his ability to lead a people he had been separated from for so long. How could he, someone who had fled Egypt years earlier, stand before Pharaoh and demand the release of the Israelites? Moses felt that he was not fit for the task, and he even tried to argue with God, asking why God had chosen him. The internal struggle Moses experienced is a powerful example of the chosen one's challenge with self-identity. Moses did not see himself as a leader. He did not see himself as someone capable of fulfilling such a divine mission. In fact, he tried to avoid the responsibility by offering excuses. He wasn't a good speaker, he wasn't the right person, and surely someone else could do the job better. Moses' sense of self-worth was undermined by the enormity of the task, and he questioned whether he had the strength, the authority, or the wisdom to carry out God's plan. However, despite his doubts and struggles, Moses ultimately accepted the calling. He recognized that the mission he had been given was greater than his own limitations. As Moses continued on his journey to lead the Israelites, he was constantly forced to confront his own fears and insecurities. He had to come to terms with the fact that, in order to fulfill his divine purpose, he had to transform himself into someone capable of leading a nation. This transformation was not easy, and it required Moses to let go of his old identity, the one he had carried before he was called by God. He had to embrace the role of a leader and a prophet, even though it was a role he never imagined for himself. Moses' story demonstrates the tension between personal identity and divine calling. The mission he was given was so demanding that it required him to set aside his own self-doubt and self-image. He could no longer simply be the man he once was. He had to become someone new, someone who could fulfill the role that had been divinely assigned to him. This transformation was not just external, it was internal as well. Moses had to reconcile his self-identity with the identity he was forced to assume as a leader of the Israelites. His struggle was not only about the physical challenges of leading a nation, but also about understanding who he truly was in the context of his divine mission. Who was Moses beyond his role as a leader? Could he still be himself while fulfilling this greater purpose? Or would he have to abandon his personal identity altogether? The story of Moses reveals the personal conflict that comes with being chosen for a great mission. The chosen one often faces the difficult task of reconciling who they were before they were called with who they must become to fulfill their divine purpose. It is a struggle that is marked by self-doubt, fear, and a sense of loss of the person they once were, and the uncertainty of who they will become. The chosen one must navigate this internal battle, constantly questioning whether they can maintain their personal identity while fulfilling the role they have been chosen for. For Moses, this internal struggle was resolved through his faith and obedience to God. He learned to accept the identity that was thrust upon him, even though it was far from the life he had imagined for himself. His journey is a powerful reminder that the chosen one's path is not just about fulfilling an external mission, but also about redefining their sense of self in the process. The journey of the chosen one is as much about personal transformation as it is about fulfilling a divine purpose. The chosen one is called to grow, change, and sometimes even lose themselves in order to carry out the mission they have been given. Ultimately, the struggle for self-identity is an integral part of the journey of the chosen one. It is a struggle that everyone who is called to a higher purpose must face. The chosen one must learn to reconcile their personal identity with the identity that comes with their mission. This is not an easy task, and it requires great courage and faith. The chosen one must come to terms with the fact that fulfilling their divine mission may mean losing parts of themselves, but it also means gaining a greater understanding of their true purpose in the world. The journey is one of transformation, and it is only through this transformation that the chosen one can fully embrace their calling and fulfill the purpose for which they were chosen. As we transition from the struggle for self-identity to the emotional and psychological cost of being the chosen one, we now confront a reality that is often overlooked: the emotional toll that such a divine calling takes on the individual. While the chosen one may be admired for their strength, determination, and unwavering commitment, behind the scenes, they are often overwhelmed by the weight of their mission. The path they are called to walk is fraught with stress, anxiety, and at times deep depression. These negative emotions are not just minor obstacles, they are integral aspects of the chosen one's journey. The burden of their responsibility, the constant pressure to succeed, and the awareness that failure could have catastrophic consequences can lead to an emotional breakdown. The emotional toll is not only a byproduct of the external pressures placed on the chosen one, it is also an internal struggle. The individual who is chosen for such a mission is often thrust into a role that requires them to suppress their own feelings, doubts, and needs in order to focus entirely on the greater purpose at hand. In doing so, they may begin to feel emotionally disconnected from themselves and others. Their inner world becomes a battlefield of conflicting emotions: loyalty to their mission, the weight of their duty, the fear of failure, and the guilt of being unable to fully embrace their own humanity. The strain of juggling these emotions can take its toll, leading to feelings of overwhelm, sadness, and frustration. For the chosen one, stress is a constant companion. They are under immense pressure to succeed, and this pressure can be both internal and external. The external pressure comes from the expectations placed upon them by others, by their community, or by the divine force that called them to their mission. These expectations are often unrealistic, and the chosen one must constantly navigate the delicate balance of fulfilling these expectations while still trying to maintain their own sense of self. The internal pressure, however, is even more intense. The chosen one often feels that the weight of the world rests on their shoulders. They are responsible not only for their own success, but also for the well-being of those they are called to serve or protect. This constant weight can lead to stress that is difficult to manage, and the fear of failure becomes even more paralyzing. Alongside stress, anxiety is another powerful emotion that frequently plagues the chosen one. They live with the constant uncertainty of whether they will succeed in their mission or whether they will fall short. This anxiety is not merely about performance. It is about the fear that their failure will lead to dire consequences, either for themselves or for the people who depend on them. The chosen one is acutely aware that their actions, every decision they make, every step they take, has far-reaching implications. This knowledge feeds into a constant state of anxiety, where the fear of making the wrong choice or missing an opportunity looms large. The weight of responsibility can make it difficult for the chosen one to find peace of mind. Even in moments of rest or supposed safety, the anxiety continues to linger, gnawing at their thoughts and emotions. Sometimes the emotional toll goes even deeper. It can lead to depression, particularly when the chosen one feels overwhelmed by the enormity of their task. The sheer weight of responsibility, combined with the constant internal struggle, can drain them emotionally and spiritually. There are moments when the chosen one may feel hopeless, as if the burden is too much to bear. The task before them may seem insurmountable, and the pressure to succeed may seem impossible. These moments of despair are not uncommon, as the chosen one grapples with the profound isolation and loneliness that accompanies their calling. The pain of having to sacrifice their own happiness and well-being in the service of a higher purpose can feel like an unbearable loss. A poignant example of the emotional toll that comes with such a mission can be found in the life of Jesus Christ, particularly in the moments leading to his crucifixion. Jesus, who carried the mission of redeeming humanity through his life, death, and resurrection, faced emotional and spiritual anguish on a scale few can comprehend. His mission was not only physical in its suffering, but deeply emotional and spiritual as well. The weight of bearing the sins of the world, of taking on the sins of humanity, placed an unbearable burden on Jesus. As the time for his crucifixion drew near, Jesus experienced profound anguish, both emotional and spiritual, that manifested in his prayers and his actions. One of the most significant moments of emotional distress came in the Garden of Gethsemane, just before his arrest. Here, Jesus prayed fervently, expressing his deep sorrow and distress to God. He knew the suffering that awaited him, and in that moment he was overwhelmed by the enormity of what he was about to face. Jesus was not only facing the physical agony of crucifixion, he was also carrying the emotional burden of the sins of humanity. The weight of this responsibility led to an emotional breakdown, where he asked God if it were possible for the cup of suffering to be taken away from him. His emotional distress was so profound that the Gospel of Luke tells us that Jesus' sweat became like drops of blood, a physical manifestation of the spiritual and emotional agony he was experiencing. Jesus' anguish was not simply about the physical suffering he would endure, but about the emotional toll of being separated from God in the process of bearing humanity's sins. In his moment of greatest need, when he sought comfort from his disciples, they were unable to stay awake and pray with him. This added to his sense of loneliness and abandonment as he faced the reality of his mission with no one to truly understand the weight of what he was enduring. His emotional anguish was not only about the fear of physical death, but also the burden of the sins he would take upon himself. Jesus, as the chosen one, felt the full weight of the responsibility placed upon him. The emotional toll of this task was overwhelming, and the anxiety, stress, and sorrow were so intense that they became visible in his physical state. The experience of Jesus Christ in Gethsemane serves as a powerful example of how the emotional toll of being the chosen one can manifest in profound spiritual and emotional distress. Even someone with the strength and resolve of Jesus Christ was not immune to the emotional suffering that comes with carrying such a monumental responsibility. This emotional toll is not a weakness. It is a testament to the immense pressure the chosen one endures. Jesus' experience shows us that even those who are chosen for great purposes are human, and they too face the emotional challenges that come with such an overwhelming calling. In addition to his suffering in Gethsemane, Jesus' crucifixion brought further emotional pain. He was betrayed by one of his closest disciples, denied by another, and ultimately abandoned by most of those who had followed him. His emotional distress continued even as he hung on the cross, where he cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" In this moment, Jesus felt the full weight of emotional and spiritual anguish as he experienced the profound isolation and alienation that came with the burden of humanity's sins. His emotional toll was as much a part of his mission as the physical suffering he endured. The emotional toll of being the chosen one is something that few can truly understand. The internal conflict, the anxiety, the stress, and the depression that often accompany such a mission are not easily visible to those around them. The chosen one is expected to bear their burden with strength and resolve, but the emotional cost is often hidden beneath the surface. The fear of failure, the isolation, the constant pressure to succeed, all of these factors contribute to an overwhelming emotional strain that can lead to profound despair and spiritual anguish. For the chosen one, their path is not just a journey of external challenges, but one that takes a significant emotional toll. As we conclude our exploration of the emotional toll that comes with being the chosen one, we now turn to the most profound and often most unspoken aspect of their journey, the hidden pain. This pain is something that no one else can truly understand, and it is a suffering that remains largely invisible to the world around them. While the chosen one's mission may be witnessed by others, and their sacrifices may be acknowledged in some way, there is a deep internal struggle that is often left unrecognized. This hidden pain is an essential part of their journey, and it is something that only they can truly bear. It is a burden that cannot be seen by the outside world, but it is felt deeply by the individual walking the path of divine calling. The hidden pain of the chosen one is the suffering that arises from carrying a responsibility that no one else can fully comprehend. It is the emotional and spiritual toll of knowing that their mission, no matter how important, often comes at the cost of their own peace, happiness, and well-being. This suffering is not always visible. It doesn't manifest in the same way physical pain does, nor does it leave scars that can be seen by others, but it is every bit as real, and often it is even more difficult to endure because it is something that the chosen one must carry in solitude. There are few, if any, who can understand the depth of this pain, and so the chosen one often walks alone, holding on to the weight of their mission and the suffering it causes. Unlike physical pain, which can often be treated or alleviated by others, the hidden pain of the chosen one is something that cannot be shared or eased by others. It is a silent suffering that only the individual can feel, and it is the emotional and spiritual burden that comes from carrying a task so immense that it demands personal sacrifice on a level that others can hardly fathom. This pain is not always the result of failure or loss in the traditional sense. It is more the result of the sustained effort to meet the expectations placed upon the chosen one, to constantly give without receiving, to continually sacrifice without acknowledgement of the toll it takes. There are moments in the lives of the chosen ones when their pain becomes so profound that it seems as though it might break them. But they do not have the luxury of expressing this pain freely or showing it to the world. They must continue, moving forward with their mission, all the while carrying this silent burden. The hidden pain can lead to emotional exhaustion, where the chosen one feels as though they are running on empty, with nothing left to give, yet they are expected to keep going. This internal struggle, this unseen suffering, is what makes the journey of the chosen one so uniquely difficult. One of the most poignant examples of hidden pain in religious texts can be found in the story of Job, a man whose faith and endurance were tested to unimaginable extremes. Job is a central figure in the Old Testament, and his story is one of unbearable loss and suffering that is largely unrecognized by others. Job was a righteous man, blessed with wealth, health, and a large family. He was a man who followed God faithfully, and yet, in a series of tragic events, he lost everything. His wealth was taken, his children died, and he was struck with painful sores from head to toe. Job's suffering was immense, and his pain was not just physical, it was emotional and spiritual, as he struggled to understand why such suffering had befallen him. In the midst of his suffering, Job's friends came to visit him, but instead of offering comfort, they accused him of having sinned and brought about his misfortune. Job's pain, both physical and emotional, was compounded by the lack of understanding and support from those around him. His friends, who were supposed to offer him compassion, only added to his suffering by suggesting that his pain was a result of his own wrongdoing. Job was left in isolation, not only in the sense that he was physically suffering alone, but also because his spiritual anguish went largely unrecognized by the people around him. They could not understand the depth of his pain, and they could not see the immense emotional toll that his suffering was taking on him. In the face of all this pain, Job never denied his faith in God. Despite his grief, he continued to wrestle with the question of why he was suffering. His faith was tested to its core, but he remained steadfast in his belief, even as he struggled with doubt and despair. Job's hidden pain was not just the loss of his family, his wealth, and his health. It was also the emotional and spiritual toll of enduring such suffering in silence, without the support or understanding of those around him. His pain was compounded by the isolation he felt, as his friends and even his wife could not relate to the magnitude of his suffering. They could not see what he was going through, and thus they could not offer him the comfort he so desperately needed. Job's hidden pain was a suffering that only he could truly understand. In the end, Job's story is one of endurance and faith in the face of overwhelming hardship. God did eventually restore Job's wealth and health, and he gave him a new family. But even after his restoration, the emotional and spiritual toll of his suffering was something that Job would carry with him. His hidden pain was a part of his journey, and though it was eventually acknowledged by God, it was never fully erased. Job's story is a powerful reminder that the Chosen One often suffers in ways that others cannot see, and their pain is something that only they can truly understand. The hidden pain that the Chosen One endures is not just about the visible losses they face. It is about the internal struggle that no one else can perceive. It is the emotional and spiritual toll of having to walk a path that is fraught with challenges, suffering, and sacrifice. It is the pain of knowing that, no matter how much they give, how much they sacrifice, there will always be something missing. The Chosen One often carries this pain in silence, because they are expected to fulfill their mission with strength and resolve. But the truth is, the pain is there, and it is real. The hidden pain is an integral part of the journey of the Chosen One. It is a suffering that cannot be fully understood by others, but it is deeply felt by the individual who walks that path. This pain is a reminder that the road to fulfilling a divine mission is never easy. It is marked not only by external challenges, but by the unseen, often unacknowledged suffering that the Chosen One must endure. The hidden pain is the silent burden that the Chosen One carries, a burden that defines their journey and shapes their character. It is a part of their story, and though it may never be fully recognized, it is an essential part of the path they must walk. As we come to the end of this exploration into the journey of the Chosen One, we reflect on the many profound and often invisible challenges they face. Whether it is the weight of responsibility, the constant fear of failure, the sacrifices they must make, or the emotional toll that leaves them drained and vulnerable, the path of the Chosen One is never without hardship. However, as we've seen, it is not only those who are chosen for a grand purpose who experience pain and struggle. We all, in our own ways, are confronted by obstacles, difficulties, and suffering throughout our lives. The difference lies not in the absence of these challenges, but in how we respond to them. The true test is whether we can endure, grow, and rise above the pain, continuing to move forward in the face of adversity. Throughout this video, we have examined how those who are chosen for great missions must navigate a unique set of struggles. Yet, as we consider the path of the Chosen One, we are reminded that their suffering and their strength can resonate with each of us. In our own lives, we often face moments of loneliness, self-doubt, anxiety, and hidden pain. The difference is that the Chosen One's suffering is often magnified by the expectations and burdens placed upon them, and they must bear these burdens alone. However, their journey mirrors the universal human experience in many ways: emotional battles, personal losses, and the constant quest for meaning and identity. While their struggles may be more visible or acknowledged, the hidden pain that the Chosen One endures can be seen as a reflection of the hidden battles that each of us faces, even if they go unnoticed by others. We should take a moment to reflect on the Chosen Ones in our own communities. They might not wear a title or bear a recognizable burden, but many of us encounter individuals who carry immense responsibilities, often silently enduring hardships that others cannot see. They may be leaders, caregivers, mentors, or even those we take for granted. The next time we come across someone who seems to carry an extraordinary weight, let us pause and consider the hidden pain they might be bearing. Just as we've discussed in this video, their struggles might be invisible, but they are no less real. Acknowledging this can help us show more compassion, offer support, and perhaps even learn from the quiet strength that such individuals display every day. Whether you see yourself as the chosen one or not, it's important to recognize that everyone faces challenges that shape who they are. It's how we rise above these challenges, how we navigate the pain and obstacles that life throws at us, that truly defines us. The path is not easy, but with resilience, faith, and a sense of purpose, we can endure even the hardest of trials. As we close, I encourage you to reflect on the hidden pain that may be present in your own life or in the lives of others around you. Take a moment to consider how we can be more compassionate, more understanding, and more supportive of those who are silently enduring their struggles. If you found this video meaningful, don't forget to like this video, share it with those who might resonate with it, and be sure to subscribe to the channel so we can explore more thought-provoking topics together. Thank you for watching, and remember, even in the face of great challenges, we have the strength to rise above and find purpose in our journey.